Transportation Telecommunications Committee and the Appropriations Committee hearing on the DOT, the funding. So welcome to this afternoon's public interim hearing of the Transportation Telecommunications Committee and the Appropriations Committee. I'm Kurt Friesen from Henderson, Chairperson of the Transportation Committee, and Senator Wishart is the Vice Chair of Appropriations, which I think she'll be showing up shortly. I'll begin with a few procedural items. Please silence all your cell phones. Those wishing to testify should fill out a green testifier sheet and leave it on the desk. When you begin your testimony, it's very important to clearly state your name and spell it for the record. The staff, I got legal counsel Andrew Benton on my right and Sally Schultz is the committee clerk on my left. And that I'll have the senators introduce themselves, starting with the Appropriations Committee members on my left.
Steve Erdman, I represent District 47, 10 counties in the Panhandle, Nebraska.
Mark Colderman, District 24, Seward, York, Polk, and a sliver of Butler County.
Mike McDowell, LD5, South Omaha.
Myron Doran, District 30, Gage County, and part of Lancaster.
Rob Clements, District 2, Cass County, and Eastern Lancaster.
Senator Joni Albright, Northeast Nebraska, Wayne Thurston, and Dakota counties, and just picked up a portion of Dixon.
Dan Hughes, District 44, several counties in southwest Nebraska.
Mike Moser, District 22, Platte County and part of Stanton County.
Senator Wishart, you can introduce yourself.
Hi, Senator Wishart, District 27, West Lincoln and Lancaster County.
With that, I think we'll get started. Senator Stinner is unable to make it today, so Vice Chair of Appropriations is Senator Wishart. We will, I think we'll get started. Director Selmer, come on up. And I think, everybody, there's going to probably be a few questions and things like that with some of the revenue that's coming in. So, I think everybody's looking forward to hearing kind of what you have to say. So welcome to the committee meeting.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Friesen, members of the Transportation and Telecommunications Committee, along with members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is John Selmer, John Selmer. I'm the Director of the Nebraska Department of Transportation. And I'm before you to present our analysis of Nebraska's transportation needs over the next 20 years. I will also give an update on the Build Nebraska Act along with the Transportation Innovation Act. I am the third presenter of this information over the same number of years, and I'm pleased to find the agency in its current environment much more favorable. The Nebraska Department of Transportation is more agile and resilient because of the lessons learned during the 2019 floods and the lingering COVID pandemic. Every citizen in Nebraska is dependent on our transportation system, whether directly as a motorist or indirectly through others providing resources and services. NDOT desires to provide a convenient, safe, innovative transportation system for all Nebraskans. We understand the significance and acknowledge the trust placed upon us, assuring that this transportation system is available today and into the future. Before we discuss the reports in front of you, I want to share some perspectives on Nebraska's transportation system. There are approximately 95,000 miles of state, county, and municipal roads within our state. Of that, state highways comprise 10,000 centerline miles, or roughly 22,000 lane miles. If we look at the number of vehicle miles traveled in a year, the state system carries about 64% of that traffic. If we look at the total miles traveled by heavy trucks, the state system carries over 86% of the freight. There are also over 15,000 bridges in the state. Of those, 3,500 bridges are on the NDOT state highway system. This equates to about 23% of the total bridges in the state. Interestingly, if you compare state bridges to county and municipal bridges using another metric, such as the size or the area of the deck, the state bridges actually have 20% more deck area. This would indicate on average, state bridges are 5 times the size of county or municipal bridges. I share this information to simply show that counting assets doesn't necessarily give some of the important context. The condensing of traffic and truck volumes on a smaller part of the system and the number and size of state bridges highlight the use and importance of this state highway system. I will now direct my testimony to the two documents in your possession. I will first focus on the document entitled the 2021 State Highway Needs Assessment. If you turn your attention to page 2, you will see that the 20-year need for the state highway system is $14.8 billion in today's dollars. Since last year, the 2021 needs have increased by 9%, which is greater than our projected 5% increase that was shared last year in the near term, or the 3% that we look at the remainder of the 20-year period. We believe that this trend won't continue, and it is due to cost escalation related to supply chain and labor issues. 3 categories are considered in developing this total amount. These categories are shown on page 3: asset preservation at a total projected cost of $9.5 billion for the 20-year period. System modernization and operation for $1.8 billion, and capital improvements for an additional $3.5 billion. Asset preservation makes up approximately 64% of the total 20-year need assessment, and thus I will spend some time on this category. The focus of this category is to maintain the existing system. Asset preservation includes activities such as patching, crack sealing, pavement resurfacing, bridge repair, and bridge redecking. Of the $9.5 billion, pavement preservation accounts for $8.6 billion, and bridge preservation is $865 million, or roughly $900 million. The department annually monitors pavement condition and performance using automated distress collection van for determining pavement needs. This information is fed into our pavement management system, predicting future performance and suggested treatment strategies. We monitor bridge conditions by performing biennial inspections that meet the National Bridge Inspection Standards. This information is inputted into our bridge management system and similarly is used to predict future performance and determine prospective project timing. On page 4, you'll notice 2 charts. The upper chart depicts the average pavement condition of both the interstate system and the other state highways. This condition is based on a composite rating called the Nebraska Serviceability Index, NSI, which ranges from 0 to 100, with the larger number indicating better condition. The goal that we have set is an NSI between 80 and 85. Why do we set the target as indicated? To answer that question, we need to look at the graphs on page 5. The top graph shows the typical performance of a pavement throughout its life. The top boundary of the blue portion shows that early in a pavement's life, the NSI value is high until it hits an inflection point in which the blue boundary takes a steeper dive, representing that the pavement condition is getting worse at a faster pace. The key to maintaining pavements is to schedule projects while pavements are in good shape, as shown by the top of the lime green area. This allows us more flexibility in the types of projects and the benefit of costing less. It also enables motorists to experience pavements that ride smoother. The goal of 80 to 85 represents a condition before the steep drop in NSI. The strategy of preservation and prevention is no different from similar activities that we experience in our daily lives. Hopefully we change the oil in our vehicles and not replace engines. We replace roofs and paint siding instead of repairing the interiors of our homes. We visit our family care physician to reduce the risk of more problematic illnesses. Not only does this chart set the lowest desired NSI, but it also indicates a maximum value or range we would like to stay in. The bottom chart indicates why we don't want to overinvest and achieve an NSI of 100. As indicated by its title, the closer we get to a perfect condition, the rate of improvement starts to decrease and the gains are not worth the investment that it takes. For those of you that enjoyed your physics class in high school, a similar analogy is trying to have an object reach the speed of light. As you get closer to the speed of light, more energy is required until infinite energy is needed, and you never reach the speed of light. Similarly, maintaining perfect conditions require unlimited resources. Bridges have a similar performance curve as pavements, but they are more complex due to the various components that each of them have their own rate of deterioration. Our goal is not shown on page 4, but we strive to have no more than 5% of our bridges in poor condition. The last topic I want to cover under this category is whether these numbers make logical sense. It's hard for the mind to grasp numbers of these magnitudes and their reasonableness. Let's start with bridges this time. The average cost to replace a bridge is $240 per square foot. So what I did is multiply this by the total deck area of state bridges, and I get a value of $6 billion. And if I assume that I can get bridges to last 100 years each, I should be then investing $60 million per year. This quick calculation would indicate then over a 20-year period, if I'm replacing bridges on that schedule, that I would need $1.2 billion. This reasonably compares with our value of approximately $900 million and shows that the different principles of asset management actually allow us to have a lesser value. If we look at pavements, we desire a 15 to 20-year life for our pavements. Therefore, using the 20-year life, we can divide the 8.6 billion indicated for pavement preservation by the total system of 22,000 miles. This calculates roughly to $390,000 per lane mile. This value correlates closely to our experience with current project costs. Hopefully the previous exercise was beneficial. Now let's turn our attention to page 6 in the category System Modernization and Operations. The total projected need for this category is $1.8 billion. The 3 subcategories include roadway modernization, bridge modernization, rail crossing, and rural transit modernization. In a broad sense, this category addresses deficiencies due to highway system usage changes without adding capacity. So as some portions of the highway system experience greater traffic volumes and experience operational issues, the following types of projects are programmed. For roadway modernization, typical projects would include intersection improvements, shoulder widening, cameras, dynamic message boards, or other smart technologies. Bridge modernization projects would include widening and bridge rail upgrades. As for rail crossing and rural transit, rural crossing projects consist of installing safety improvements, such as crossing signals and gates based on exposure ratings. Rail transit includes providing assistance to rural areas of less than 50,000 individuals, and also we're looking at contribution is also being considered for proposed intercity bus service between Lincoln and Omaha. The final category of the needs study is capital improvement at a projected cost of $3.5 billion. It is no surprise to us in this room that this category gets the most attention. The projects within this category are high visibility and usually a significant focus of a community or region. This category includes projects such as constructing new highway corridors or the relocation of highways. It also includes the addition of highway capacity, such as on expressway projects and the addition of lanes to the interstate system. Interchange and urban freeway improvements are also included in this category. In the next 20 years, approximately $2.5 billion of the $3.5 billion will be focused on three areas: completion of the expressway system, the expansion of the interstate system from Lincoln to Grand Island, and the Omaha Metropolitan Freeway improvements defined in the Metro Area Travel Improvement Study that was recently released. Much of this future work is possible due to prior legislation. That is the topic of the next handout titled Build Nebraska Act and Transportation Innovation Act 2021. Please direct your attention to page 1 of the second document. Build Nebraska Act was enacted in 2011 and dedicated 1/4% sales tax receipts for the expansion of the expressway system and also federally designated high priority corridors such as the Heartland Express and the preservation of the existing transportation system. Revenue first became available in 2013, and the act at that time was projected to generate $1.2 billion for the department. Currently, it is estimated $1.6 billion will be available to the department by 2033 when the legislation sunsets. On page 1 is a map and a table that identifies projects funded by BNA that are complete, either complete, under construction, or in design. The Transportation Innovation Act was enacted in 2016. The purpose is to accelerate highway capital improvement, promote and provide funds for innovative bridge solutions for deficient county bridges, and help finance transportation improvements that support new and growing businesses. The legislature created at that time the Transportation Infrastructure Bank, which received a one-time investment of $50 million in 2016 from the Cash Reserve Fund. It is projected that $442 million will be generated prior to 2033. The table and the map on page 5 show capital improvement projects financed with BNA and TIA funding over the next 10 years, starting in 2016. The County Bridge Match Program is shown on pages 6 and 7. The program allows for matching funds of 55% of the total project cost up to a maximum of $200,000 per bridge. Up to $40 million from the Transportation Innovation Act can be allocated to this program through 2023. Over $20 million have been allocated to improving over 300 bridges in 58 counties. The department has allocated $5.8 million in the Economic Opportunity Program as of November 2021, as shown on page 8. 16 active projects have leveraged $1.8 billion in private investment. Now I'd like to focus our attention back on page 3 of the document. In response to LB 579, we've included information on the expressway system. The expressway system was established in 1988 with 16 corridors being identified for a total of roughly 600 miles. Today, approximately 70% of the work is complete, and the system's current status is depicted on the map, showing segments that are complete, under construction, under design, or in planning. There remains approximately $1 billion worth of work to be completed. On page 4 is a Gantt chart showing the proposed schedule to complete the remainder of the system. Currently, we are showing completion of all corridors by 2040, provided that we are not impacted by unforeseen issues, including contractor capacity, material shortages, cost escalation, resource agency staffing, and another 100-year flood. To conclude this afternoon, I would like to briefly address the recent passage of the Infrastructure and Investment and Job Act, EJA, or also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law Bill. There is much still to be determined, but I will share what we know. On the formula side, the department will receive approximately an additional $110 million in FY 2022. This amount will increase by around 2% for the following 4 years of the law. Of that, about $45 million will be in existing programs with existing rules. The remaining $55 million will be in new formula programs where the rules are not defined. The most significant new formula program is for bridge preservation, with about $38 million in additional funding coming to the department annually, and about $7 million going to local bridges annually. As for discretionary funding, there are large increases in the existing RAISE and INFRA grants. Additionally, there are several new discretionary programs, but due to time, I'll only cover one of them, which is the Bridge Investment Discretionary Program. This program focuses on rehabilitating and replacing both state and local bridges. What is of interest is that the U.S. DOT Secretary is required to award each state not fewer than one large project, a minimum of $50 million, or 2 other than large projects. For many of the new programs, whether formula-based or discretionary, there remains much work to be accomplished by U.S. DOT to develop rules and policies. At this time, no decisions have been made on the use of any new federal funds. And I want to thank you for your attention. I know I covered a lot there, and I turn the floor back to you, Senator Friesen. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Selmer. I want to mention for the record that Senator Geis, Senator Vargas, Senator Boer, and our Dean Wright is who started giving your presentation. With that, are there any questions from the committee? Senator Boer.
Thank you, Senator Friesen. Thank you for being here today. I want to talk a little bit about, I know that not everything's in place yet on the infrastructure bill that was passed, but with that $110 million that's coming in, and particularly $38 million you said in bridge preservation, that's going to be a large amount of money coming in for bridge preservation all at once. Is there a plan for how you will sort of manage the workload of that all at once?
Yes, we're currently looking at that, and you know, the check's in the mail too, so the funding isn't here at this point. So determining when that comes, you know, and looking at the rules, you know, we have bridge projects that are in the works that might be able to leverage this funding and free up funding in other categories where we have greater flexibility in existing programs. So we're looking exactly what this means and how does that help the program, and does it allow us more flexibility in other existing programs.
So, but I guess my question is even a little more basic than that, is with all of this sort of happening at once, do we have the capacity for putting to use all of those funds? And is there going to be a different sort of financing structure in place that's necessary to do that, or have you thought about any of that yet?
Well, when we're given this, this isn't like prior legislation where you had to have shovel ready. So typically we have a period of several years in which to utilize the funding. So we're looking at that. We're also having discussions with the AGC and our partners in the construction industry as to what is our capacity, our vendors, what is their capacity, because every state's being hit with this. So this definitely will be a topic in which we're looking at in terms of how quickly we can leverage this additional funding.
And then another question I asked, this is sort of a very particular question, but you said that you plan the bridges to last for 100 years and that you did your calculations that way. Is that I mean, that seems like a long time to me. Is that a practical idea that a bridge will last 100 years?
That is a desire with the new technology, with different strategies in terms of deck materials, reinforcing steel, and again, using good preventive maintenance techniques. So that's the goal that every state is striving for. There are bridges that are in there. If you look at the Brooklyn Bridge is getting up there. So there are bridges in existence that do that. But yeah, I would say that's an aspiration and what we're looking at achieving.
Because we wouldn't even have data much past 100 years on bridges in Nebraska in terms of, I mean, do we have any 100-year-old bridges in Nebraska?
I'm sure, I don't know. I'm sure
Maybe.
I
Maybe
can
a couple.
probably find that. It probably needs a plaque on it somewhere.
But then the other thing would be, so that would be sort of going forward, we want them to last 100 years, but I imagine that many of the bridges that are currently in existence were not built with those same kind of technologies and may not last for 100 years.
That's correct.
So we would have probably some catch up to do before we would get to that 100 years. So we might have a bigger cost.
That's correct. You know, my example there was really showing a steady state that everything's equivalent. So the newer bridges are probably able to. I'm sure we've got some that are not quite as able, and some of that might be due, whether it's due to traffic loadings or is it just purely environmental? It's not a loading issue. It's just been out there for 100 years. And what type of maintenance strategies have been used on it.
And they probably in the 1930s weren't imagining what the situation is that we have now in terms of how we're using our bridges. All right, thank you. I think that's about all I have. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Senator Ford. Any other questions? Senator Geist.
Thank you, Director. Thank you for being here. And I just briefly have a question. It says that there, almost your very last couple of lines, that there remains much work to be accomplished by the USDOT to develop rules and policies. So you anticipate with some of this money federally that there's going to be strings attached. Is that correct? Or
there always seems to be. There are certain requirements or desires of the administration with this legislation. So, you know, some of the new ones are looking at carbon reduction. So we don't know exactly what that means for Nebraska. Another is looking at protect resilience. So what does that mean? Is that only to be used for existing infrastructure? Can that be used to enhance planned infrastructure? And then there's $6 million in electric vehicles infrastructure. So a lot of the new money it's very targeted. So I would expect that there be some requirements in how those funds are utilized.
is there a completion date with these funds? Did I miss that?
You know, not that I've seen. Typically, like I indicated, we have several years in which to do this. So we're not the only player in this with the other 49 states looking at this. So I know Federal Highway is under the gun to quickly get the rules and policies identified for these areas.
Thank you.
Is that our guys? Sarah Colkerman.
Thank you, Senator Friesen. Director, thank you for being here. First of all, I want to compliment you on, or your department, on all the work you did in my district this past year. You did do a lot of protecting of some of the infrastructure that's been there by overlaying some roads, and fixing some roads. But at the same time, I'm going to be a little bit critical. I'd like you to turn to page 4 and ask you to explain something to me. On our expressway system, I've talked to people in the administration about finishing 81, Highway 81. And it looks to me like that's from York all the way up to Columbus, or just south of Columbus. It's important that we get that 4 lanes in there. And I think the same can be said about 275 as well as the Heartland Expressway. But my concern is, as I look at this, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm told right now that it's in design and planning stages. So on the bottom of page 4, it says East Junction north on 92, and then that's all in red. That's in design. Does that mean that the design won't take place until those years out there?
No, those are the anticipated construction dates. So
So
what
the
we're
red is
doing,
the
that's
design
the
list.
schedule that is currently under design. We awarded the contract this year to design that. So if it's in red, that means it's currently being designed. And the dates shown are the anticipated dates in which we will break ground and start construction.
So you're going to break ground, as an example, in 2029, all the way out to 2034? Maybe I'm reading that wrong.
Well, right now, say the bottom one, we're looking at, starting in FY '29 and anticipate that corridor, based on the grading and other activities, will take up to 4 years to complete.
Just that corridor right there.
Right. But as you see them overlapping, there'll be other corridors that are occurring at the same time. So, if you look at FY '30, there are 3 red blocks. So 3 separate corridors will be going simultaneously in terms of construction work.
Okay, then I turn the page, on page 6, it kind of talks about development of US 81 expressway expansion. I don't know, it just seems like there's some conflicting information here. And that the Pan American Highway was established years and years ago and became part of our infrastructure. And I can tell you Columbus has had good growth and Norfolk's had good growth. And we can't afford to continue to send trucks down 81 to 90 to get them over to Iowa so they can go up I-29 and bypass all of our good people. So I would hope that we could, with the money that's coming in, we could make an attempt to move that up on the schedule. Again, I'm just speaking for my district, but it's been on the radar for a long, long time. I've been here 7 years, and very little has been done of expanding it. And it stopped at York, and it's been designed several times. I mean, I can go back and show you where it's been designed. It's been pitched out the window. They've attempted to buy land. It's a nightmare. And we need to get that finished. We just lost another person on that road a couple weeks ago. Our truckers want to go that way. I hope we can get that done.
I appreciate your comments, and looking at the Gantt chart on page 4, that was created prior to the EJA legislation. So our feeling is definitely it'll allow us to hold to this, and we are looking at, are there ways to accelerate, but it won't be at the front end because of the project delivery process, but there might be ways on the tail end to compress it. That we haven't figured out yet as to understanding all the limitations or how we can use funding here. But we're aware of the desire to get the expressway system completed that was probably the focus of a lot of my initial conversations with a lot of individuals around the state. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Coltman. Senator Albright.
Thank you, Senator Friesen, and thank you for being here, Director. You've got quite a report. In visiting with some of the counties in my district, a lot of them are concerned about these bridges and with the funds that they're getting from the federal government. How are you working with them? And do they have to have enough of their own funds ready to go for you to be able to help assist them?
You know, as we look at this and our understanding of the increase in the bridge money is that it's 100% money for the county. So for them, they could see.
So they don't need any assistance from the state?
Not as we're interpreting it today, that it's 100% money for local bridges.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking at roughly $7 million annually going into that could be used.
So they would not need any assistance at all from you, maybe taking a look at anything or anything?
You know, I think that's a good question.
And I only ask that because I know a lot of the counties don't have access to the engineering portion of it.
It depends on what you talk about assistance. You know, there's 3,500 state bridges and local bridges, so you're looking at 11,000 plus out there. My belief is that you're probably not going to be able to replace all of them.
Correct.
There's not going to be enough funding. So some things to maybe consider is geospatial analysis to look at. Can you look at how its bridges are being used? Can you consolidate some? Can you convert them into culverts that can carry whatever load you're not worried about oversized loading, those types of things. But it gets very personal when you're talking about individual bridges. So in some ways, I think maybe some counties wouldn't mind, maybe myself injecting a little bit. Others might not like that. So, but I think that is probably wise to look at how to do that instead of just maybe broadly distribute. But you know, that's an option too. So I don't know what the tolerance is.
Right. Thank you.
Looking at it a different way.
Thank you, Senator Albright. Senator Moser.
We have a bridge close to Columbus. It's an overhead truss bridge. It was built in 1933, so it's 89 or so years old. And it's, I think, scheduled for replacement. But so there are some that are that old, maybe with better design, better construction, better maintenance. Maybe we'll make the 100 years. It's a cool old bridge. There's a companion one right to the side of it that has an under truss system, so it's a lot easier to get farm equipment through and wind tower blades and all of the things that you have to try to get up and down that highway. Also, I want to thank the department for the inclusion of the expressway system highlights. I know that was kind of a contentious thing to include, but and from the Highway 30 perspective, it's pretty much resolved. But I think Senator Colderman's comments, I think, were kind of piqued by his viewing of that extra information and seeing where we're at. He'd like to see it done. Sure. And I would too, but reality sometimes sneaks into the equation. Thank you very much. Appreciate your coming to testify to us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mosers. Senator Dorn.
Thank you, Senator Friesen, and thank you, Director, for being here. Truly enjoy this hearing that we have. Last year, I believe, they talked about the increased cost had gone up approximately, if I remember the number, it was about 8%. And in here, you quoted now this year, our costs have gone up 9%. But you're also looking at that to stabilize more or not have that type of increase. Expound on that a little more, I guess. Is that construction cost or labor shortage, or what is driving that increase in cost in your opinion? And
well, I think it's a little bit all of the above. It's very hard for us to really isolate there were different times where we're having material shortages that possibly was impacting some of the costs to our contractors in terms of preparing their bids. We're seeing not only in the restaurant industry, but even in the construction industry or ourselves, CDL drivers and just having employees available to do work are impacting the cost. So I guess I'm hoping that typically as we've looked over long periods of time that we don't typically have this continued increase. I desire not to come here next year and say, well, guess what, we have another 9–10%. But we're continually looking at that. We look at every letting and see what type of response we're getting on the letting and seeing if there's trends. And then we do work with our industry partners to try and get an idea.
Last year, they also talked about, they used to at one time have maybe 5 bidders on a project, and that's slowly gone down over the years. Are you still seeing that?
Yeah, we're still averaging under 3. So I think between 2.5 and 3. And I think our magic number was 3.5 is where we maybe see a difference in terms of competitiveness out there on projects. So a lot of that goes into how we package projects, how many projects do you have out there. So one thing we are going to be concerned about is if there is a lot of influx of money, if the industry doesn't have the capacity, I don't think they want to let the work go, but it might come at a much more premium to get that work accomplished.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Dorn. Senator Erdman.
Thank you, Senator Friesen. Thank you, Director, for being here. My questions are about the Heartland Expressway out in the western part of the state, 385 and L62A. It was my understanding that they were going to do the dirt work on that 385 this year and the cement work next year. I was by there the other day, they're about 2 miles from completing the cement work. And the sign says estimated completion is November of 22. So they've got the dirt work done and the cement almost laid. What is going to take them another year to finish that?
And it might be just updating the sign. That's something I can check. I'm not aware. So it seems like we're ahead of schedule.
I would agree they're significantly ahead of schedule because they're about 2 miles from being completed.
I will check on that and see. I think misinformation isn't a good thing. So
The other issue is, I believe the bid, when it was let for that last 18 miles that they're doing in Morrow County, was like $30 million. But in your book, on page 1, it says total cost of that is $70 million. Does that include what they did from Alliance South to where they started this year?
well, and I think it might be going beyond that. So
It was my understanding last year when Mo was here and made the presentation, it was $30-some million for the construction that we're going to do in Morrow County. But on page 1, it says the total cost is $70 million. I wonder if that includes what they've already done from the city of Alliance to that 10 miles south.
I would think it includes the entire corridor identified. So it's not just the existing project, but I can verify that.
Right. I appreciate that. I noticed also in your presentation over on page 5, you talk about the completion of 385 from Alliance to Chadron. You've got a red line there on page 5 on the map. Okay, it says it's under construction, under design, so I would assume that that's the next part of the project that's going to be completed. Is that right?
Right.
So my question is, on L62A and 26 from Minnetonka on, there's about 20-some miles there. Why would one want to complete the end of our project and leave the middle part not done? Because you have the highways completed from Kimball to Minnetonka. From Minnetonka over to 385 is 2-lane. And now you're going to have a completion from 385 to L62A junction to Alliance. And then you're going to complete a Super 2 from Alliance to Chadron. But that portion, 20-some miles in between, is not complete. Why did you not build the 4-lane from Minnetonka to 385 next instead of going to Chadron and Alliance?
I'll have to look at that. All segments aren't equivalent in terms of their needs, in terms of NEPA, environmental documents, and things like that. So it could be just phasing issues. But again, I can look at that as to why. If it was all similar, it would make sense to me also to just continue on and allow everybody to have the benefit of an improved section. So my feeling, but I need to verify this, is that there are other issues surrounding the development of the corridor.
Like the example I used, if I'm building a pipeline, I don't build this segment and go down 50 miles and build that segment. I just continue on from the beginning. And I thought it made sense if you're a Minutair, you do the Minutair to 385 first, and then from 385 junction 62A to Alliance, instead of building part of it here, part over here, and have part of it in the middle. It's not complete. Didn't seem to make a lot of sense logically.
That could work too. Part of it could be parallel processing instead of serial. So it could be actually accelerating the completion date, but I need to look at that.
So then I don't see anywhere in your presentation where you're showing the completion of from Highway 26 over Minutair to L62A 385 junction at all. It's not even in your design portion. I don't even see that. So what is the time frame on building that portion of the highway?
So you're saying it's not on here?
No, I don't see it.
And I think the reason for that is that technically it's not an expressway corridor. But I can provide you that information as to when we were looking at that.
Why wouldn't it be an expressway corridor if the expressway comes to Minutair and picks up again 20 miles later? Why would that in between?
Well, it's called the Heartland Express, right? But the Heartland Express technically is not part of the designated expressway system. So it's a technicality. It's a federally designated high priority corridor in which we're doing that. So when the expressway system was defined, the Heartland Express was not part of that.
So my last question is this. So we're gonna build a super two from Alliance to Shadow instead of a 4-lane, is that correct?
Well, I think that's the concept right now, but I know a lot of individuals in the area are not satisfied with the Super 2. So currently that's the concept.
Well, I'll tell you, I drive that highway a lot, and a Super 2 from the junction where you built the 4-lane would have been sufficient there as well.
Okay.
So I'm in favor of the Super 2 from Alliance to Shadow. That's all you need.
It's good to
You
hear.
didn't need a 4-lane from the 62A to Alliance. You needed a Super 2.
Okay.
And so what it is, but there's 3,000 cars a day go by my house. So I'm looking for you to build that highway by my house, so only 1,500 go by my house and 1,500 go by on the other side of the highway.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you, Chairman Friesen. Thank you, Director. I have a general question, seeing the extra money coming in. Just one other comment as to whether we're going to have more projects worked on or not. If you have capacity to add more, we're going to continue to do what we've been doing. And are we going to add more on top of that? Do we have ability to get that done?
Well, I think we're going to look at that. I think probably the first priority is really looking at those corridors that we have under work. Can we deliver those quicker? But we're also going to be looking at the needs, the preservation of the system. So I think definitely there'll be more bridge projects. There's a significant influx of funding in there. So my feeling is there are going to be more projects, but as to where they are, we need to understand really how we're being directed to use this additional funding. One thing is there's 110 million, but I can't take that as an agency and put all that towards the expressway because of how the funding is designated. So we're going to, look at how we can best do that, and getting input from yourselves and from your communities and regions, really look at strategically how can we best invest the resources we can get there.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Clements. Any other questions? Got just a couple things I'd like to cover a little bit, and some of the things we've talked about in the past is the county bridge match program, which was, everybody seemed to like it. I know it didn't get to everyone who wanted money, but it was limited in funds. Is there any thoughts about starting that up again? And again, I know we talked about the counties getting some money, but when you look at the number of bridges and things like that, has there been any push from anyone to get the county bridge match program going again?
Well, currently under legislation, it's supposed to sunset in 2023, and it did indicate up to 40 million. And I think we're looking at, by the time 2023 comes around, it'll be roughly $28, $30 million. Yeah, and part of that legislation also indicated that innovative practices were supposed to be used. Where I think we're kind of running out of innovative practices. We're really just addressing the backlog of need out there. So I think part of the hope is with this federal aid, that will be more funding than what they're receiving today, but there's always going to be more. I don't think it's bad to look at that, but I think maybe we want to look at it in a more holistic way as to are there ways to find efficiencies in terms of investing in our local bridges. I understand the need there. The need is great there. There's a balance. I would rather have heavy agricultural equipment using the local system instead of coming onto the highway system because assets aren't available. So there's a trade-off back and forth that are worth looking at. So I think it's worth looking at. Personally, I think it's a good program out there, but then it does also compete with funds that are to address the expressway system or other capacity projects. So that's the tension we operate under.
Well, that was a little bit my next, when you looked at your ongoing costs in the future, you're using 3% inflation rate. Obviously, even a year ago, I think we were talking some projects were coming in 20% over expected costs. And so is using 3% a legitimate inflation number right now? Because if you change that even a few percent, that's a lot of projects now that are either get pushed back or.
Well, I think as we look at it, I don't know if necessarily two dots determine a trend, but the third is probably going to. So maybe, next year, this is something we are looking at. Historically, it seems to be reasonable. And, if you look at 20 years and you change it 1% across, you're talking significantly different dollar amounts on there. So I agree with you. We need to look at it, but I think I'd like one more data point to see if it's.
I mean, I agree with you, but I just see right now already that wages and those types of things have really taken a big jump, which I think is a good thing. I'm not downplaying that at all because
right.
With 1.9% unemployment, we expected wages to go up and they finally are. So those are costs that are going to continue to climb. So I am concerned, I guess, even with the extra money, with inflation eating up some of that immediately, that we obviously always will have more needs than we have revenue. But, that brings me to the point of, and I don't want to push this on you in a way that the bonding talk that's happened in the legislature last year and is probably going to come up again. Part of the process, as you talked about, is getting this extra money. It's not as though you can use it this next year. Can you talk us through just a short amount of timeline on what it takes to use up this extra money? Because now we have to speed up our design process, permitting process. What is the time frame now just to work through the design and the permitting process, much less start to actually build a road?
Well, I'm saying typically you're probably looking around 5 to 7 years once you decide you want to work on a corridor, and that's really being accelerated. So just the planning process and then working with the different resource agencies, whether it's Fish and Wildlife, Corps of Engineers, Federal Highway, in developing a National Environmental Policy Act document, whether it's an EA or an EIS. So typically these larger projects, because of their impacts on wetlands or surrounding property, they just take that long to get completion. There's in a sense, significant time built in, not only for the reports, but to get public input and to go back out and get public input. A lot of things have to be published, and then you have to have a certain amount of time in which individuals, to give them to respond. Other types of things are really limited resources. There's not that many archaeologists out there or people that have understanding of historic structures. And so we're competing with that. Now, as you're injecting more money, I think our concern was that just because you inject a lot doesn't mean that the capacities of these other major players necessarily have the ability to meet your schedule out there. The constructing is the easy part. It's everything in front of that to do that. And so even once you do that, then there's right-of-way acquisition, possibly condemnation, other types of things. And you're also hoping that your public input meetings go well. If they don't, and there's a lot of controversy, there's a lot of responding, a lot of going back out, re-meeting, changing concepts. So I haven't seen, typically when we're doing these projects, they're not usually the easy ones. And there's different viewpoints that just take time to work through the process. So I think our feeling on bonding was, now we know that there is legislation that came in and injected money, and now we got to really see what the buying power of that is too. Is it really going to give us, as you indicated with inflation, I think the news out there is that there's all this money coming in. There is a substantial amount, but it isn't the billions, and it doesn't necessarily change the processes that we have to satisfy in which to build a project.
Okay. One last question, and that involves access to your state right-of-way for broadband and the state's need for broadband. So have you addressed that at all and looked at that? And, I know the state at some points needs broadband to hook up their electronic signs, cameras, things like that. Are you working in public-private partnerships? Are you putting in your own broadband, or where are you headed in that direction?
Well, I think there's some question as to the legality of what flexibility we have as an agency in terms of partnering with private firms or using our right-of-way. So, I would say we're interested. We want I think there can be a partnership in terms of broadband for the state and also for us as we're looking at advanced technology to implement that we're going to need ways of conveying data out there. And so I think there are some meetings coming up in which we're trying to look at that and really trying and understand the issues surrounding the ability to do that. There's some questions. I was just in a committee meeting looking at cybersecurity on transportation networks, and if you're doing public-private and other things, I think we're all almost being forced to go to the cloud and being out and not being able to maintain, but there's still some questions as to what is the risk of not having our own system and partnering with someone else, or how can we, in a way, separate that and assure ourselves that we have a robust system.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Senator Wisher, you want to wrap up the meeting? We're the partners here, so appropriations is a big part of this also, because I know appropriations committee is going to be handling a lot of the revenue that's going to be dispersed.
Yeah, I think the message I heard from you, and first of all, I appreciate you being here, and you did a great job for your first time in front of this joint committee. So thanks for coming to Nebraska and leading this effort. The main thing for me, and I would imagine for the committee, is when we do get those details on the amounts and pots of money that they'll go into, just coordinating closely with you, because we have other investments in terms of ARPA, just wanting to make sure we're not duplicating dollars and investments in the state. So looking forward to, I anticipate we will get more of that information in January, which will be timely then for us to sit down and have those conversations.
I agree.
Thank you, Senator Wisher. Thank you, Director Selma. Seeing no other questions, we'll close the hearing. Thank you.